Angie Vishyanan, and I am the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program that connects prospective law students to lawyers for mentoring so they can learn a little bit more about the legal profession before they decide if law school is the right choice for them. And at the beginning of COVID-19, we started doing these weekly meetups where we brought in lawyers and law school admissions consultants and all sorts of people to come and chat with you guys to give you some information that might help you in your legal career. And so I'm very excited today to introduce Robert Hanna, and he is the founder of Kissoon Carr, one of the leading recruiting agencies in the UK. And he's here to talk to you today about some trends in legal recruiting during the pandemic, because we know that the pandemic's really shaken things up. So Robert, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, hello everyone. And firstly, thank you ever so much, Angie. It's a real pleasure to be here. So really excited to meet everybody. I'll try and make this as informal as possible. It may look rather formal of all my slides, and just enjoy it because we will be circulating all of the slides afterwards, so hopefully you don't feel like you have to scribble away like mad. But yeah, as Angie rightly said, I'm the proud founder of Kissoon Carr, and just my plotted history very quickly. I always wanted to set up a business connected to the law because my grandfather, Mr. Carr, hence Kissoon Carr, ran a very successful law firm here in the UK. And so I'm trying to emulate his very successful success in the legal recruiting world. So that just gives you a plotted history to my business. But on to the stuff you want to know. So trends in legal recruiting in time of COVID-19. So there's been a hell of a lot that's naturally happened. The first thing that law firms have done or did originally was very much looking at protecting their cash flow. They were suspending, they were looking at reducing equity partner draws. Interestingly, just today, a couple of Silver Circle, Magic Circle firms over here have announced they will be re-releasing equity draws in the next 11 to 10 weeks. So that's quite an interesting change from where we were initially. There was lots of furloughing, redundancies, unfortunately. BCLP, which is a large international Silver Circle firm over here in the UK, launched their redundancy consultation process. They've also closed their office in Beijing, and that was set to be a landmark office to really help them with a lot of their cross-border transactional work. There were freezes and temporary reductions on discretionary bonuses, and they cut a lot of rookie pay. So that was one of the big things where a lot of junior and aspiring lawyers, training lawyers, were very antagonized, but understanding of the situation. So some of the names you may be most familiar with, the likes of Clifford Chance, compensation cut by 5.5%, Allen and Overy by 10%. But interestingly, White & Case during the pandemic has survived very well, and they have now rivaled other large US law firms such as the Quinn Emanuel, Skadden, Kirkland Ellis, and upped their pay during the pandemic by 24%. So they're near to the Cravath pay scale here over in the UK. But this very much was all around consolidation and actually looking to build revenue growth, the initial reaction from law firms.
Yeah, actually, Robert, I was going to ask you about that. Was that, so were the Magic Circle law firms already on par with all those big New York firms as far as salary goes, or were they lower than the New York firms and then they were shrinking even more?
So typically in the UK, the US law firms pay the most. So they pay probably 40 to 50% more than typical UK firms. The Magic Circle for a trainee, if we use simple figures, is probably 100,000 sterling, pound sterling, whereas a US firm, say Millbank or Quinn Emanuel over here, would probably pay in the region of 120 to 135,000 sterling. So there's quite a bit of difference, and that's a trend that we've seen probably over the last 5 to 10 years of US law firms penetrating the London market and acquiring the Magic Circle talent. So yes, but yeah, typically the US headquartered, New York headquartered firms pay significantly more in London than the UK firms.
Okay.
And by the way, if anyone has any questions, just shout out, interrupt me, please ask. Happy to answer any questions. So I briefly mentioned there, the initial reaction was the market switched. So as recruiters, we're in good markets. We really want to see less of a client-driven market. What I mean by that is when there's a job freeze, it halts all activity. So we're unable to do what we like to do in terms of actually find people for jobs. Typically, we work in a candidate-driven market where a good lawyer or an attorney, we can have conversations with our law firms and they would be actively looking to buy because they're interested in good quality talent so they can staff them on transactions or matters. So that initial reaction really impacted us for quite obvious reasons. Law firms, like it or lump it, they had to embrace virtual operations and hiring processes. And to some of our major law firms, this was quite alien. Some of them were just really not open to it previously, prior to COVID. Now, some of them have embraced and they're very much happy and looking to continue to go down those virtual processes. Unfortunately, there were further office closures. People were put into bubbles. There were rotation systems. There was maximum capacity of certain offices and office space, typically 5 to 10%. And that figure has kind of changed throughout the pandemic, depending on sort of what tiers we're in with COVID restrictions. Interestingly, they redesigned summer associate programs and launched new virtual fairs, and they've been really well popular received, and they've been more accessible for people to actually get onto because they can take higher numbers of people on those. And there's been opportunities for growth. So other US elite law firms like Wilkie, Farr and Gallagher, they have now offered a training contract for September 2021. So a good point to note is typically the US law firms in London do not offer, not all of them offer training contracts. Some of them do not. They only look for experienced hires. So they will consider, if you're an international arbitration or a capital markets lawyer, maybe practicing in New York, your best way of maybe trying to transition is once you've got some post-qualification experience under your belt, and then you could look to bring you in as an experienced hire, because certain firms in the London market do not offer training contracts. That may change, and like firms like Wilkie are certainly looking at doing that. But if you have aspirations to looking into the London market, that's a good point to note when you're researching firms to be thinking about. Okay, law firms have had to be entrepreneurial and think a little bit differently. So they've been looking at alternative resourcing models. So interim legal talent has been a really big feature, and alternative legal services, ALS is what they call over here, and integrating those services has really kind of risen significantly faster than we were seeing previously. Another amazing development that we've never seen before, and this is where I respect certain law firms over here. They've been trying to protect their staff and their trainees. So Womble Bond Dickinson, which is more of a local firm to the UK, but still international, does great work, extended their training contracts in light of hopefully being able to ensure that those trainees are taken on after the pandemic. So they put a 6-month extension in place, which I really commend, because we all know how expensive, how hard. So they really are trying to protect their staff where possible. White & Case, again, I referenced, they launched a very interesting international seats program to make up for the lack of overseas seats during the pandemic, because they're usually very well known for offering that. So they honoured that through keeping their remote operation. And Millbank, big player in the London market. Everyone will probably know about Millbank and where they are, particularly in the US. They were set to move to a brand new, swanky, lovely London office, but that has been significantly delayed, and they're rethinking that option in light of COVID, which is a really interesting development. So what have been some of the challenges for us? Well, firstly, I'd love to say that we have indefinitely been recruiting virtually, but we haven't. We're used to more traditional methods, and we always embrace technology. Particularly my firm, I'd like to think we're quite far advanced with digital marketing using virtual features, but we've still had to navigate the unknown and the uncertainty, and we don't know everything. Everyone says to me, you're a legal recruiter, you must know everything and what's going on. I am only human. It's like when people come to you and ask you as an attorney, you must know everything about this, that, and the other. It's not humanly possible. So I will put my hands up and say it has been challenging navigating this environment. Video interviewing, no surprise there, replacing face-to-face meetings, and contracts have been signed remotely, and that was something I didn't think would ever be possible 5-10 years ago, but that is quite the thing, and that is being embraced. So you could potentially join a new employer, and we have done that, where they've gone through 4 rounds of interviews and signed a contract on the dotted line virtually. That is unheard of in the legal recruitment world in modern times, so that's really great to see. There has been a lot of sort of, as you say there, counter-cyclical areas and financially attractive moves over the course of the pandemic. And that kind of speaks for itself, but a lot of people have been looking, for example, Angie, you made a great point. Where do the pay brackets sit with Magic Circle US? We're seeing a lot of the Magic Circle top UK firms thinking actually a US firm might be slightly more attractive now, given that they can have a lot more virtual home working, and they don't mind working the hours quite as much.
Do you see any real difference in the UK firms and US firms about remote working? Do you see either of them adopting it more so than the other?
I do see, so Linklaters, for example, or Clifford Chance, they have said quite openly they are going to continue to try and embrace flexible working, along with Allen and Overy. So the long and short of it, all of them are going to have to retain their good talent, and because it's going to be expected now. I still think a lot of lawyers are missing the office as well. So it's fair to say it's probably, I think I put it on one of my next slides, about a 60-40, 70-30 sort of split, in terms of some saying, look, I don't mind working from home and having the flexibility, but actually just to get the work done, particularly the more junior attorneys and lawyers, they want to be learning by osmosis, because a lot of the law firms over here are open plan. And so they can, hear and overshadow calls from partners and, senior associates and other associates. And that's something that particularly the junior people are missing quite a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like I hear from my lawyer friends all the time that they feel like millennials here in the States don't want to go back to the office. And so I think a lot of the firms are struggling with that and trying to figure out, how do they continue to embrace like the remote work environment, because I think many firms would prefer to go back to having everybody butts in seats physically in the office if possible. So that's why I'm just curious to know if you've seen a real difference between the UK and US firms, because I think traditionally in the US they would very much prefer to have everybody in the office.
Yeah, and I think law firms over here, it is much the same. I think they would rather have people in the office, but they're understanding of the situation. So what else are some of the other challenges? There's been fierce competition for the top talent, because there's been, a lot of candidates are quite reserved. Lawyers are not thinking about making a move. There's so much uncertainty. We also have that little thing over here called Brexit, which is creating another complexity on top of the whole global pandemic for us as a nation, and what that might mean for certain practice areas and uncertainty. So again, as recruiters, we're trying to make the market, we're trying to kind of introduce new opportunities to people, encourage them to think about extra new things. That's made it quite challenging. One thing that I'm really passionate about is the health and well-being and mental health, and certain law firms have really been doing, I still think every law firm could do more, but particularly smaller UK law firms, boutique type firms over here, it's almost, it's in their DNA, which is so great to see, because it is so important. So there's some really good role models over here, and I can kind of introduce people if they want to know or see what people are up to around that, because that's really important. I think there will be a long-term impact on firms' performance. While some and most associates will say they've never been so busy in the particular practice areas, which I'll talk about in a minute, unfortunately there are, lots of firms that haven't been able to survive or be as robust or entrepreneurial or pivot, and so there have been quite a few layoffs, not necessarily so much on the fee earning side, but a lot of the back office operations side, they've been hit quite significantly. Talent retention, for firms that, haven't really looked after or protected their people, that's been a bit of an issue. And just attracting, as I say, lateral hires at the moment has been a little bit of a challenge. So what else? As I mentioned, we want the candidate-driven market. So it's starting to swing a little bit towards now candidate-driven markets. And this is good for us as recruiters. As much as we want to kind of look after and consult, we do need to make money to keep the bills, pay the bills, and everything else that's going on. So we need it. We need the market to be moving. So the initial hot practice areas that we were working on, which is probably no surprise, employment, because we had the whole furlough, redundancies, job support schemes, bounce back loans. There's been so many initiatives rolled out that employment was just phenomenally busy. Restructuring and insolvency, unfortunately, a lot of our high street global retailers and lots of organizations, hospitality, retail, they've been significantly hit. Dispute resolution. In a good market, there's always going to be disputes. In a bad market, there's always going to be disputes for one reason or another. White collar crime, particularly connected to furlough fraud and things like that, has been busy. Private client, wills, power of attorney, trusts, and corporate tax, they again, initial sort of areas which were quite hot. So then fast forward to sort of what we're seeing more and what we're getting more instructions of now that we're sort of 7 months into the pandemic. It's certainly, we're looking like we're going back to a second wave here, but at least with the knowledge and understanding and the predictability, these are the levels and new instructions and areas we're starting to see more of. So as I put there, finance, and there's lots of complex areas in finance. So anything from leverage, structured, project, they're really, really kind of picking up. Equity and debt capital markets as well. Property litigation, residential property and commercial property. Unfortunately, there's going to be so many disputes around this, particularly around fee disputes, tenant disputes, landlord disputes, and people having to pay for offices they haven't been in, and all of those things. So that's been on the rise. Private equity, quite interestingly, for bullish people within the PE space, that's really picked up. So Skadden, who you will all know and be aware of, they have hired 6 associates in their London office throughout lockdown, and they've got 3 other PE mandates. So that just tells you the strength of certain US law firms over here, and how much demand for work they have. Insurance litigation, again, business interruption, all of the factors related to COVID has led to that. We were speaking, I think, before, Angie, around sort of IP, IT, cyber, and GDPR, data protection. That's getting increasingly more busy. And competition law, and that's related to Brexit. I'll talk about that in a bit as well, but competition law is picking up. And changes, as I say, there, flexible agile working schemes are here to stay. There's about a 70-30 split, lawyers in favor of working from home, not working from home. Okay, so how lawyers have found going through virtual interview processes, assuming this is going to be the norm, or some sort of new norm. It's been interesting. So with our guidance, and counsel, lawyers are actually finding it not too bad to navigate. There was a little bit of nervousness about acting on camera and video and conducting themselves, but by and large, they found it not too bad. Face-to-face interviews where we have and where we can within COVID restrictions, we still have been doing. So where we legally can, and it's safe to do so, they have still been taking part. It's made it a little bit difficult with maneuvering processes. Lawyers would also prefer, from my experience, to do more face-to-face in terms of getting their personality and reading the body language of the other interviewers, the other side. Dress code, the basics. So, there's certain things, around sort of Zoom interviews or Microsoft Team interviews or whatever it would be. Obviously today's super informal, but if I'm sitting in on a maybe a senior interview or offering my counsel, I will make sure that, even myself as the representative recruiter, I'm dressed appropriately. So, making sure you have all the right things in place. So certain lawyers, that's been a bit of an education, getting their kind of home office looking right. And I think the other thing where we've had feedback, we've had some fantastically technically very strong lawyers, attorneys go to interview, and they've not got through. So if this is here to stay in terms of virtual interview processing, it is so important that you can articulate the situation, the task, action and result, and actually your technical skill sets, because so many people have let themselves down, and we are almost contesting with the law firms that this person is great, they're really good, they've got X, Y, and Z references. Well, they didn't show that in the video interview. And so my biggest tip to that is really make sure that if you're going to get into a technical or showcasing your experience, you've got to be able to articulate yourself so the listeners and the interviewers are really buying into you, because we've had so many people fall, unfortunately. Ways to stand out, consuming legal content. There's so much out there: podcasts, there's legal society groups, webinar letters, law firm websites. There's so many things you can do to improve your overall commercial awareness. I know it's well banded around commercial awareness, but particularly over here in London at the moment, that's a lot of what people are really looking for. Common things we see: tailoring, not bothering to tailor your application. You've got to not do the copy and paste and cut corners. It still amazes me how people play the numbers game in terms of just number of applications. I think it's quality of applications and the way you network around that application that counts. Name dropping information, things that you've researched about the firm that again makes you stand out, and get them biting. Some people feel they have to show absolutely everything on their application. No, you need to sound interesting and appealing so they want to know more about you. If you're running initiatives and you've articulated them, then there's stuff that they'll want to know to encourage you to be brought in. So this is quite an interesting way I look at framing things when you're trying to sell yourself on an application. So knowing your strengths and demonstrating them. So let's just say, as I've put there, for argument's sake, you put a strength as time management. So how can you actually articulate that in a way that it's going to be valuable to the firm? So as I've put an example there, you've balanced your university work whilst, getting involved in other society commitments. Maybe you're part of the law society, maybe you're part of a legal networking group, maybe you're part of this, that, and the other. But you're demonstrating, rather than just listing the skills, you're actually putting some demonstrable experience that shows that actually you would be good at time management. So then you match those strengths to the particular law firm's competencies. Okay. And this is where your research, you need to understand what's important and what those law firms' core competencies are. Is it attention to detail? Is it, motivation, commercial awareness, whatever it is? And then the other common misconception, particularly over here, is people think they need to sort of shy over or skirt over any potential weaknesses or areas that they're not as strong in. Address your weaknesses, the competencies you are less strong on, but show how you can actually overcome them. I think that's a really interesting point. This shows willingness to know, to learn, and offers a solution. Because in my opinion, in legal recruiting for over 12, recruiting over 12 years, I've never met the 100% perfect candidate. Okay, none of us are perfect. As much as we would all like to be, I'm sure it's not possible. So always remember that. And as I use my little acronym there, always be authentic. Your personal brand, be authentic to you, because it's got to be, the firm's got to be right for you as much as it is for them. Okay, so I'm not going to list these all, but here's just a few things about how to be different or things that we're seeing. I'm going to focus on the other ideas because some people are really doing this. And Angela, who's on today, sort of particularly talking around social media, creating an online presence, a personal brand through LinkedIn, social media platforms, just adding value to the community is really, really important. Attending online, offline events like this, start a podcast, get involved with diversity and inclusion initiatives, mentoring initiatives, showcase your thirst for knowledge around legal tech. Legal tech is a hot topic, as I'm sure it is everywhere at the moment. You can't be naive to the fact that you need to be researching, understanding, and how that's shaping the legal services for the next generation of years to come, not just now, but the future. And show that you're willing to do more through, as I say, podcast, sport, reading, whatever it might be, because all these things make you very relatable and human.
Yeah, I think that also goes to the authenticity piece that you were talking about, Robert, because, I think people are always like, okay, well, how do I be authentic? And it's like, well, to be authentic, that's how true you are to your own personality, to your spirit, to your character, right? So people need to know what those are. So you need to be expressing, what do you believe in? What is your character? What is your spirit? and then, doing things that align with those things, whether it's showing that through a podcast or showing that through your posts on LinkedIn or whatever it is. But that's how you show people that you're being authentic. If you're not putting yourself out there enough to tell people what your values and characteristics are, then you're not going, the full way to show that you're being authentic, because they don't know what to compare you by. So I think it's important that you have to at least go so far as to tell people, what do you believe in? What do you care about? What are your values?
So. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And not just because Angela's on, but I think Angela is doing a very good job. Particularly, I enjoy following her content and personal brand and what she's doing. And I think that's exactly what's needed right now. So I really, really encourage that. So there's a new term banding around over here called the O-shaped lawyer, which is really interesting for the next generation of legal professionals. They're wanting people to look at things with more openness, looking at being more opportunistic, which talks around the entrepreneurial kind of legal skill set that's needed to be more a part of the future. Being original, which talks about what we've just talked about there in terms of being authentic and really owning it. And that leads on to taking ownership, taking accountability, self-accountability. So that is a kind of, if I was to sort of summarize the whole thing, those 4 points are very, very important. Okay, so what's going to stay and what's going to go from a legal recruiting perspective when things go back to normal? Caveat, I said to Angie at the start before I came on air to this as well, things do change. Everything is receptive to it. So I'm speaking as of today, but with our government and everything I'm seeing, things are changing quite rapidly. So I'm just going to put a small caveat into that. But there is a real new opportunity to reinvent and think outside the box now when it comes to sort of legal recruitment. There's been adoption of new technologies, AI, virtual events. There's even sort of screening systems and platforms that we're working with to speed up the interview process. All these kind of emerging technologies to help with the recruiting process, e-scanning, e-signing, all of these things which were there before but are now just been so further advanced, they're going to stay because it's just going to speed things up. Courts operating remotely. Who would have thought that hearings and courts, big high profile cases would be actually being conducted remotely? Well, they are. And I genuinely feel that they might be here to stay in parts as well. There's going to be a digital transformation and there's going to be a drive on keeping costs down and really trying to increase efficiency and flexible working patterns. I do believe, as I've said previously, that they are here to stay. So what are some of the emerging trends that we're seeing? There's a rise in boutique law firms operating. So a lot of people in the Magic Circle or top UK or even certain US international firms here are taking the plunge to actually set up themselves, take their book of business and try and compete with the likes of some of the larger players. So we've seen that particularly in litigation, and there's recently been a new finance boutique that's set up. As a slightly alternative model to that, there's a rise in dispersed law firms over here. And so they are very much where they look to take people on as consultants, and it offers lawyers a lot more flexibility. So they can work to their own schedules. They don't have a chargeable billing target. They're provided with a marketing budget. They're provided with infrastructure from a firm, the firm's brand, but they very much have their own flexibility to work their own hours, their own cases, set their own prices on matters. And so that's proving quite an attractive option for lawyers, particularly in trying to juggle work-life balance and family life. That's being really, really kind of well taken up. I mentioned before around competition law and good old Brexit, which is happening over here. So this is picking up competition law, and I think it's going to be very, very prominent for us because the CMA, which is known as our Competition and Markets Authority, is on a massive hiring spree over here because the UK wants to be known as having a global leading authority with regards to looking after digital advertising, online platforms. There's so much in the media. I'm sure a lot of you have maybe seen The Great Hack and all of these things on Netflix and all of these shows, and how there potentially is a lot of consumer protection focus that's needed. So that with the likes of Facebook, Apple, social media, this is a big thing that they're looking at, particularly when it comes to a competition law perspective, and that's going to get even bigger. There's been a rise, as I mentioned, corporate private equity, US law firms in London, and equity capital markets, and M&A has been very slow. A lot of transactions were almost put on ice at the start of the pandemic, probably around March, April time. Slowly, I wouldn't say very much at a great pace at the moment, but M&A is starting to resurface, which is good to see. Okay. So there's a rise in staff attorneys and what we call sort of professional support lawyers, PSLs, within law firms. And again, why is that becoming popular? Because they offer a better work-life balance. You don't have the pressures of fee earning. And I think it's very clear to mention there's lots of routes you can take as an attorney. You can obviously qualify, work within a law firm. You could look to go in-house and be an in-house counsel. You could look to maybe get involved in a legal tech startup. But actually, if you quite like working in a law firm environment, but you want the role maybe to more tailored to you and maybe personal pursuits, I am a big advocate for the professional support lawyer role. It's very research, you're still connected to the transactions, but you don't have to work necessarily long hours and have the fee earning target pressure, but you're still surrounded by that environment. So we're seeing lots of people quite interested in taking that route. Podcasts, that's becoming more and more of a thing. Baker McKenzie have just launched over here in the UK what they call trainee talent talks, which is all about their aspiring and current training attorneys and lawyers, giving them tips, ideas. And so lots of law firms are going to be doing their own podcasts. Allen & Overy have one, and it's a great way for them to kind of attract new talent, aspiring attorneys and lawyers, and also to communicate their brand, their values, and be more relatable. So podcasts are definitely here to stay. And really interestingly, lots of barristers, within the arbitration practice have moved back to the bar from elite US law firms. So there's a big name over here, Wendy Miles QC, who moved from Debevoise and Plimpton, probably one of the most iconic partners in a London law firm, has moved back to the barristers 20 Essex Chambers. And I've put Sue there as well, who was the founder and joint managing partner of Quinn Emanuel's London office, has moved back to the part. And that's really interesting to see. I do think, being quite candid, they're quite financially motivated moves in terms of why they're doing that, but that would have been unheard of probably before the pandemic. Okay. Future lawyers and things to be thinking about and scenarios you're going to manage, building relationships with clients and colleagues. And it's great, Angie, that you run these informal sessions and meetups, because not only network with the speakers, i.e. myself, yourself, but with your colleagues and people around you, that you share your nuggets of information, share your tips, work together. You're all in this to help one another. I can't encourage that enough. Interviewing, you need to be a skilled interviewer. You need to know how to pitch. Ultimately, if you want to be a partner in a law firm one day, business development is crucially important. You have to build your book of business, or you have to be able to manage client relationships. You're going to go through an internal promotion process to try and make senior, to make a counsel, to make a partner. And you have to learn how to have difficult conversations with clients, partners, and colleagues. As nice as life is, unfortunately, business, there are going to be tough times. So you have to build up that skill set of kind of managing, conflicting situations, negotiation skills. As I said, they're resolving conflicts, managing people, and managing meetings as well. Okay, so I'm not going to read that all out, but this will be after the slide. But there's Richard Susskind, OBE, who's definitely one of the most cited authors when it comes to the future of legal services. He's quoted saying what you can see there in terms of tomorrow's lawyers will be people who develop the systems that will solve clients' problems. And he is a big advocate for saying, long and short of it, that technology is not to replace the lawyers, it's very much to complement. And there's lots of he's wrote some fantastic books, and feel free to ping me directly, or if you'd like to know more about Richard and what his beliefs are. But he's very much a pioneer and big voice and advocate for all things legal tech. But I do think it's worth having a look at Richard and his kind of background. Okay, and this is just a quick kind of FYI, really. And it's not because I'm a legal recruiter, but I genuinely feel it's so important to have a relationship with a legal recruitment consultant from the start of your career throughout. And why I think that's invaluable is because ultimately recruiters are in the market day in, day out. They are speaking to law firms, they're speaking to people, they're natural networkers. And so they will be able to give you so much more than what you probably can only get from a website, from what you can get from one person's opinion that you may know, and so much more. And they will have the relationships, because ultimately you can apply to jobs online. You know, there's an application process. You can put your resume in, you can put your cover letter in, and you can hope. And that's great. And, you know, sometimes you will get through, but you need a recruiter who's going to be on your side, who understands what's important for you, who can then exercise and leverage those relationships they've built up over years to your advantage. So I say they will get you probably further advanced down processes. They'll also know about the culture and can relay and best represent you far better than how you may be able to portray yourself if you didn't have their knowledge. They very much know everything going on, maybe bonuses, pay rises, all the sneaky stuff that you're curious about. They are most likely to have those insights into that. And they can help you obviously with CVs, interviewing, and all the other general pieces. The other thing which I take pride in is being a trusted advisor. I think you have to be seen. I would hate my candidates and clients not to see me as someone that they can put their trust in. And someone, you know, ultimately we're dealing with people's careers. You know, it's a career move. It's not moving jobs. So it's not just moving jobs for more money. How does that fit in with their personal, their lifestyle goals, what they're trying to do? How does that sort of in-house move affect them long-term? How does that private practice move benefit them or not benefit them? So we really try to, or should, act as a trusted advisor and be proactive for you and really tailor our service for you. And that's why it's so important to have that relationship and that recruiter on side who's prepared to put in that time for you. They can act as a sounding board. Sometimes I talked about, you know, being a lawyer, having to have tough conversations. I have to be a sounding board sometimes and tell people when it's not going to happen. And, you know, as long as I can give rational, constructive feedback as to why it's not going to happen, and I can present a solution, then, you know, that's a better pill to swallow rather than you're not going to get this job, you know? And so there's a stark difference between actually really being a professional sounding board and consoling certain people at times. And it shouldn't just be a relationship with a recruiter when you want to get a job. It should be monthly catch-ups. It should be coffees. It should be you know, you should almost have a kind of friendly, you know, relationship. It's almost like your accountant, your lawyer, your recruiter. They should be seen in the same light. And that's why I feel like you should build and make an effort to build relationships with good legal recruiters, because they can save you a lot of time. And it's important because if they believe in you and you can trust them, they are more likely to put extra energy into helping you secure that next move.
Yeah, about that, Robert, actually, so for at least here in the US, a lot of US recruiters won't work with people straight out of law school because they simply can't place them in first-year associate position. You know, the law firms have their own hiring mechanisms for that. So when do you suggest they start building these relationships? How would you approach a legal recruiter if you were, say, still in law school or in your first year?
I think you would definitely, well, that's a really good point, but I think you would approach a recruiter just showing you're very serious, showing that this is where you want to go in your career, showing that you've researched and you know what it takes, and explain to the recruiter, look, hey, I'm obviously not X level at the moment, but this is the journey I'm going on. This is what I've got planned. I'd love to keep you in, you know, keep in touch for when the time is right. I'd really value some of your insights and information at this point in time, and see if you can bring value to them. You may, you know what, you may have a friend, you know, recruiters is a network, right? So if you've got an older sibling who's been a lawyer in, let's say, Wachtell or Cravath, that could be a really good person for that recruiter. So think about whenever you're trying to form a relationship, don't just be like, hey, I want something. go to them. If you haven't got much to give sort of at this stage, give them maybe something in your network, give them some information, give them something about the net that's actually going to be of value to them. So you're starting a really professional relationship. So do you know what? Actually, Rob was really helpful for me when he was going through his training. And you know, I want to keep him in my network, and I'm going to help him, or I'm going to introduce him to people, or I will have a coffee with him as a one-off. So that's some tips I would suggest in terms of being proactive and giving something before you ask for something.
Great tips. Awesome.
Cool. Okay. LinkedIn. I think Angela, kind of a favorite kind of topic for us, but it's so important. I mean, I started on LinkedIn in 2008, and it was a platform then where recruiters would just post jobs. It was just a glorified job board. And you know what? At the time, it worked. I'm not going to lie, because lots of job seekers would look on websites and they would look on LinkedIn and they would see a job ad. Now, no. If you're seeing lots of recruiters just posting jobs all the time and not putting in content, then they're missing a trick. And similarly, if you're an aspiring attorney or lawyer, or you're a current practicing lawyer, I would strongly encourage you to break out of your comfort zone if you're not used to engaging and using the platform, because there's just so much benefits to that. You know, Angie, we got to get to know each other through the platform. Angela, we got to know each other through LinkedIn. And so your network really is your net worth. And, you know, professional networking sites, there's going to be a lot of partners, associates, future clients on there, and they need to get to know you, find you relatable, see that you're putting something into the legal community, the ecosystem, to actually think next time you speak to them, it's not a cold call or it's not a cold interaction. They're already aware of you, or they know of you. You're getting your personal brand out there. So the more you embrace the platform, go for it, Angie.
Especially for students, you know, I think a lot of them are always afraid to get on because they're like, well, I don't have anything to really write about yet. I don't have any articles that I've published. I don't have, you know, topics that I'm an expert about. And I always tell them, I'm like, you don't have to only write about things from the standpoint of an expert. Whatever you learn today, you can immediately write about that moment and what it was, that experience was like for you. And so I have a lot of law students who are literally just talking about their experiences in law school. You know, today I saw my very first horrible cold call, and, you know, and it brings back all these memories for all the lawyers, because you all remember what that was like when you heard your first horrible cold call. And so I think that content is relatable. That's what shows that you're being honest. And, you know, if you're scared of creating content on LinkedIn, I totally get it. I was terrified of creating content on LinkedIn. And if you look at my LinkedIn now, it looks like I've been, you know, creating content for forever. But in actuality, I only started really creating meaningful content at the beginning of the pandemic in March. And so from March until now, I've seen like a huge difference in the way that I use LinkedIn and the way that people engage with me on LinkedIn. You know, up until March, I used LinkedIn the way that Robert said. I just had it, you know, basically it was a glorified resume. And whenever I needed a job, I went to go look for jobs, right? And using it that way, I've been on LinkedIn since 2008 as well. And over 2008 until today, I had only made, until March, I had only made about 1,100 connections over that entire course. And then from March to now, I made like 5,000 connections because of people engaging on my content. So I think it's really important to note that once you start creating that content, people will start relating to you, and you'll get a lot more out of LinkedIn. Whatever you're putting into it is what you're getting out of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is that, and the algorithm works that way as well. The other point, if you're you've got aspirations to be a top level private equity attorney, or you want to be a top level litigator specializing in, say, construction or whatever, then make sure you're following relevant groups, or make sure you're getting into the community or ecosystems of what you're interested in. Because, you know, typically most law firms are either practice area led or sector led. So if you can show that you've built up networks and contacts, and they can upskill you, they can mentor you, they can give you information, LinkedIn is there. It's there for the taking. It's a free, you know, the basic plan is free. And I think it's phenomenal what is available. And I think you will be significantly left behind if you don't embrace the networking platform. So yeah, I just think start early. get yourself out of your comfort zone, and you'll be amazed by how much you can build and build and build. And
Yeah,
so,
you can start following people and just seeing what they're talking about. What are the emerging things that are happening in the practice areas that you're interested in? You know, I mean, I'm sure nobody knew what happened when Brexit happened. You know, so like when you saw a ton of chatter happening on LinkedIn and on all the professional platforms on Twitter, you know, about all these like, you know, issues that were now emerging. And I think that if you start following all these people and you start realizing what are the areas where there are opportunities where people don't have expertise just yet, you can start thinking about how you can develop yourself as an expert in those areas. You know, I think a lot of people who saw ahead of the game in the privacy world and saw GDPR was coming, you know, they were able to forecast like, okay, this is going to be huge. And they started developing an expertise in privacy. And, you know, many of these young lawyers who were just 1, 2, 3 years out of law school are now privacy experts because that's what they focus themselves on. So I think, you know, there's a lot of opportunity out there, even for those really, really junior in their careers, to start, you know, engaging in this conversation. You know, I mean, we actually wrote a book about it. Me and 20 other lady lawyers wrote a book about all of the connections that we've made on LinkedIn during the pandemic. And that's actually releasing next week. And Shay Rowbottom, the person mentioned on this slide, wrote the introduction for our book. So I hope that you guys check it out. And it's called Networked. So you'll be able to buy it on Amazon next week.
super excited for that book. That sounds amazing. And yeah, as you mentioned, so Shay, I've collaborated with a few times. We're quite good friends. We did a webinar, which is legal influencers of LinkedIn. So there's a really good tips. So check out that link. She offers a lot of free advice around sort of, particularly around authenticity and suggesting some ideas to how you could get started. So that's why I put that in there. Just for me, we also run a podcast which Angie and Angela has featured, and Angie is to be featuring soon. So if you want sort of check us out, that's basically what we do. I'm not going to plug it anymore, but yeah, feel free to check us out. We're just producing as much content to try and interview as many inspiring people as possible to share and just be a part of the legal community. So we've had some really cool guests. So feel free to check it out. And a very big thank you. Hopefully that's been interesting, helpful, and happy to answer any questions or just generally chat.
Yeah, that was fantastic. If anybody has any questions, feel free to jump on video and ask your questions, or go ahead and drop them in the chat box. We'll go ahead and, you know, turn off the slides. So if you want to just put yourself on video and hang out with us for a little bit, we've got about 8 minutes left, so you can ask away. But, you know, Robert, I was just so interested in so many of the parallels that we see in both, you know, the UK and the US. You know, one of the things that strikes me the most, as somebody who didn't think about it a lot when I was coming through law school, you know, but I think that our legal markets are really getting much more global. You know, there are people who are much more willing to make a move abroad these days, especially, you know, I mean, if remote work is here to stay, I think you're going to start seeing people move all around. And they're going to be willing to, you know, to work for firms that are not your typical firms that are well known in your own country, you know. And I think that there's so much opportunity out there for people who are willing to push themselves, push their boundaries, and explore some other markets. You know, I was just talking with 3 Australian lawyers the other day. We were on a call about trying to learn more about each other's jurisdictions and how to get licensed and qualified in our own jurisdictions, because I had the 3 Australian lawyers were interested in our mentoring program and what all we're teaching our students. And so I was talking to them, and they told me that their legal education in Australia is 5 years straight out of high school, right? So it's kind of like what it is in the UK, where it's a 5-year undergraduate degree, right? And they have like the lowest cost I've ever heard of. All 5 years combined only costs about 40,000 US, which is crazy, because here in the United States, like our 3-year law degree costs, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know, I mean, the average law debt, I think, is $160,000 for law school, which is just crazy.
It's interesting you talk about pricing there, because here we are looking, it's just been signed off that the SQE which is the, it's changing over from the SRA, our registered body over here. And, not only are they trying to change the system so qualifying work experience counts towards the training, but the other driver is trying to make the law more accessible and affordable. Which I'm so, I'm so pro that. So I really do welcome that, which should be coming in September 2021. So yeah, I think, the way we can make it more cost effective, more accessible, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Angela, did you have a question?
Yeah, but Elena can go first. Her question is more important.
Elena, what was this? Okay, so do you see it in the chat box, Robert?
Yeah, so I'm a multilingual attorney. My first language is Spanish. I also speak Portuguese, English, live in Chicago, and I'm doing career. But my language skills is one of my skills that make me stand out. Any suggestions how you can use them to apply for jobs, types of companies I should focus on? I type of question. Yeah, well, amazing. You speak all of those languages. I think depending on what you're interested in terms of law wise, if we're talking sort of areas of law, because what I'm seeing, I don't know if I brushed over it on my slides, but on the language skills side, Spanish and Portuguese have been quite interesting in terms of demanded by certain law firms, particularly international US law firms that are maybe trying to penetrate LATAM. So when we're working with New York headquartered law firms, they are very interested in Spanish speaking and Portuguese speaking candidates. So that's really quite interesting that you're thinking of doing that. But I definitely think those skills will help you most definitely.
Any idea on what companies you should focus on?
It really, without kind of going into my full recruiter qualification mode and understanding really what's important for you and where you want to see and where you're looking to go, I think those that are maybe operating in those types of markets that you're particularly interested in already. But I would say probably it's better for us to speak more directly so I can give you more of a general focused opinion rather than just a generic answer, to be honest.
Okay. Angela, what was your question?
So I had two, but the first one was Robert, you talked about the origin of Carr from Kissoon Carr, but you didn't tell us the origin of Kissoon.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I have a business partner when we first set up. So the Kissoon side was my business partner's grandfather. So he is from, and so it was Kissoon Carr. We both named it after our paternal grandparents. So, and he had very interestingly lived with his family all over the world. He was born in Swaziland. His father was a diplomat and traveled all over the world. They were in Papua New Guinea. They were in Europe. His mum is from Guyana, hence the Kissoon. So yeah, very, very international. And that's one thing for me. I'm also half Iraqi. As part of my international makeup, and particularly KC, it's all about embracing the community. And Angie, you're talking about that kind of connectivity and the global community. That's what I love about, one of the benefits of this kind of enhanced technology and communication is connecting so many different cultures, languages, communities together. And I love it.
Love it. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Mihai, is that how I say your name? How do I say it? Oh, and you're on mute. So.
Yeah. Hi, Angie. It's Mihai. Nice to meet you.
Okay. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for facilitating the meeting, and thank you for the presentation, Robert. Maybe before my question, I just wanted to bounce back on your comment about the pricing, Angie, because I know you mentioned it in Australia. It's pretty accessible. I graduated from University of Montreal in Quebec, and I'm actually very fortunate that pricing-wise, Quebec is very cheap. I would say for one semester, it's 25,000, books included, and to graduate, it takes 6 semesters. So it's around maximum 20,000 Canadians to have a general LLB, a Bachelor of Laws, here in Quebec, because it's heavily funded by the government.
Oh, so
whereas, for example,
2,500 or 25,000?
25,000. 25,000 for an LLB in total.
Okay. Oh,
whereas,
okay.
For example, Ontario, it can be 10,000 for one semester or 10,000 for a year, right?
Right.
And now, in regards to my question, so I was wondering, is a good time for example, myself, a Canadian aspiring lawyer, to try, for example, and jump into the British market? Should we, for example, as international trained aspiring lawyers, wait until the dust settles in regard, for example, to COVID, in regard to the Brexit? What would be your advice in that sense, Robert?
I always think if that's an aspiration of yours, you should be looking to build up your networks and contacts now, if that's something you're looking to do. I think it also depends on your personal situation and how many sort of commitments and dependents you have, and flexibility to make that kind of high risk move. Everyone says it's very, very, very hard, and it isn't necessarily most straightforward, but it's achievable. So that's the thing to say. It's certainly achievable with the right recruiter or the right people on site to facilitate those discussions to make it happen. So I think if that's an aspiration of yours, I wouldn't necessarily put it off. I would start building those networks, those connections now. So even if it doesn't happen immediately, you're well placed for when you should, if the market is to swing a little bit more. But I must stress, there is a lot of uncertainty over here at the moment, particularly with Brexit. And if you're thinking of wanting to do international cross-border law, whatever you're thinking of doing, it's worth just monitoring how we're performing on the Brexit discussion, because that's evolving daily at the moment, and that may have an impact on what you choose to do.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I know we're at the top of the hour here, so I don't want to keep you too long, Robert. But if you guys have any more questions, is it all right if they reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, by all means, I put my URL in there. I'm always happy to chat. Hopefully everyone found that helpful. It's been really nice connecting with you all, meeting you all. Angie, I'd just like to say a special thank you for inviting me over. Angela, we're besties, so it's nice to see you again. And yeah, if I can help any of you individually, please feel free to write to me. More than happy to help. But it's been a real pleasure. Thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. All right, everybody. Well, I'll see you back here next week. We've got another lineup of meetups on Tuesday and Thursday next week, and our virtual happy hours Friday of next week. So come and hang out with us, and I hope to see you all there. So talk soon.